A warm welcome to you watching our country focus edition, South Africa. DutchCulture is a network and knowledge institution for international cultural cooperation. We help Dutch artists and organizations in their international ambitions by informing, supporting, and advising them. In the last years, the main theme for the cultural cooperation with South Africa for the Netherlands has been transformation and identity, with a focus on youth as the future leaders and tomorrow's decision makers. This theme was chosen because it provides the opportunity to discuss the past that continues to influence both present-day Netherlands and South Africa, and to focus on the recognition of our shared challenges and ambitions and work together to co-create solutions through partnerships between South African and Dutch counterparts. Among others, it resulted in the Co-Create Identity cultural program that took place in the last years, and a final event, the Co-Create Identity experience last week in Cape Town. Before we start the conversations, I would like to invite Sebastiaan Messerschmidt, the Dutch Consul General in Cape Town, for a few words about the Co-Create Identity program and experience.
Thank you, Josine. If you look around the world, there's many societies that are in an identity struggle. We are having trouble trying to relate to each other. And this is something that South Africa has a lot of experience in, coming from an apartheid background and legacy, and also a colonial past. And the colonial past, of course, is where we come in. It was the East India Company, the VOC, that landed in South Africa to build a so-called refreshment station in 1652. But it ended up starting the town of Cape Town, and bringing in thousands and thousands of slaves, people enslaved from especially Southeast Asia, and South Asia, and parts of Africa, and that shaped the South African culture of today and the South African society of today. And we have something to do with that. It's not just something in history books. People are identifying themselves with that past, which is burdened on our end. So we thought it was very adamant that we should do something with this in our relations with South Africa, because we cannot just ignore the elephant in the room.
Can you elaborate a bit upon the projects that were part of the Co-Create Identity experience?
When Krotoa came to South Africa, it's such an exciting play about the sidekick of Jan van Riebeeck and the story told from the Khoi perspective in Afrikaans, in English, and in Dutch. Because it's the story of the other side, where we are not the interpreters. We are not the ones who tell the story. And that's exactly what we need to be looking for. But we need to be in the room to receive what's going on, to receive the implication. And then you have a conversation afterwards of what it all means. Another program, there's the Ons Perspectief by BrotherTill, that tells you how South African and Dutch culture can really get a lot closer on digging into identity, using spoken word, using music, using arts in a collaborative way, which is a beautiful journey. And I think BrotherTill did really well in taking that listening stance and trying to learn from what's going on in South Africa, and then step in and bring in what you bring in. But it really starts with listening. It really starts with finding out what's going on the other side. What is the emotion on the other side? What is the journey on the other side? How can I learn from that? And how can I then be part of some of the construction of what we're creating together?
Thank you very much for your contribution. Let me introduce you to our first duo. Sylvia Vollenhoven from South Africa. She's a writer, award-winning journalist, playwright, and filmmaker. And also I'd like to introduce to you Jef Hofmeister from the Netherlands. He's a composer, musician, and writer. In 1989, he founded, together with Kees Scholte, the Volks Operahuis. You worked on the project or performance Krotoa. It premiered already a few years ago. I guess it was in the Netherlands. But if being performed like last time in Cape Town, it keeps selling out. What is, in short, the story in a performance Krotoa? Eva van de Kaap.
The play is a story about a 17th century young girl who was taken into the house of the Dutch colonial commander from the VOC, Jan van Riebeeck, taken into his house as a young slave girl, and who grew up there and who later became very, very key in developments at the Cape. She became a negotiator, kind of diplomat, translator, brokering peace between the first war that broke out against the local people and the Dutch. She is known only through Van Riebeeck's letters and journals, and very little is known about her, here and in the Netherlands. And the story historically is always being told from the vantage point of Jan van Riebeeck. So we tell the story from her viewpoint, but we also bring it into the present day by using the device of two actors, one South African and one Dutch, on the set of a film. And they are here in Cape Town to make a feature film about Krotoa, and they are struggling with the story, struggling with their roles. So the play slips from the present day actors on the film set back to the events of the 17th century all the time.
Volksoperahuis commissioned Sylvia to write the piece. What's the story behind this? How did this come about?
I first encountered Lindsey Appolis. He's a famous director. And I asked him, can we do it? After a while, he said, I can only do it if a woman can write the part of Krotoa. Only a woman can capture her. I can't, he said. And I said, okay. And then they said, can I introduce you to Sylvia? Not knowing they've been together for so long already. What I find wonderful with the work of Sylvia is that she was reading between the lines, filling the gaps and the untold story that was not in the diary of Van Riebeeck, but in a way it's there.
I think it's been, for me, a huge eye-opening experience and such an opportunity for growing as an artist, as a writer, and as a person. And I remember in the old days, when I first started traveling in Europe in the 70s and 80s, and things were really bad in South Africa, they were introducing me to the anti-apartheid movement in the Netherlands, which was very, very strong and very effective. And I really connected with those people at that time. But I couldn't understand the connection between that kind of humanistic worldview and what I was experiencing under apartheid in South Africa. And then fast forward to 2018, we didn't expect for things in a professional sense to go that smoothly. We expected us to disagree more. We expected us to see things more differently, or I did anyway. The most common response from people was, we didn't know. We didn't know the details of this history. People in Holland, some of them didn't know anything at all about Van Riebeeck. On the other hand, people in South Africa, everybody knows Jan van Riebeeck. We use Krotoa as an example of how Black people have been written out of history and Black women have been completely suppressed and ignored in historic narratives. So how do we deal with that? How do we write ourselves back into the history? And so all of those powerful issues are then unpacked after the play. Sometimes we have a Q&A right there in the theatre, and sometimes we have a specially constructed forum of dialogue where we have certain key panelists and an invited audience as well as members of the public to unpack some of these things. And the result has been an extremely cathartic experience. And we've done it now in different parts of South Africa repeatedly. We had some forums in Amsterdam, one at Afro Vibes and another one at Zuid-Afrika Haze. This was the first time with the Co-Create Identity Festival that we had it with youth. And it was great because June is Youth Month in South Africa that commemorates the uprising in 1976 in Soweto that became the beginning of the end of apartheid. Within that context of Youth Month, it was very exciting to work with these young people. They went to see the play. We had 2 shows a day. After each show, a group of these young people from high schools, colleges, and universities would come into a structured workshop using the principles of theatre in education, and would unpack how they felt, what kind of effect the play had on them. And these young people were saying some fascinating things.
The cast is a mix of South African and Dutch performers.
Yeah, that was in the first runs. I found that nice that there was a real Dutchman doing Van Riebeeck in all his clumsiness, not understanding a Khoi woman, not being able to really connect.
And also the role of language is quite important in the piece.
It is.
Yeah, it's one of the sub-themes about how you destroy a people is by destroying their language. And also to get some authenticity into the performances, we wrote it in Afrikaans, English, and Khoi Gewap. We have the projection at the back. You know, in Holland, the projection was in Dutch, and in South Africa, the projection was in English, the titles. An indigenous language like Khoi Gewap has been completely suppressed in South Africa and is making a comeback, and people are beginning to learn it again. And Afrikaans has been seen, especially by people outside of South Africa, as a white colonial language, or the language of the oppressors. And the reality is really that Afrikaans is a black language. It was the language that the slaves spoke. It was first written in Arabic as a book of prayer for the slaves.
Especially in South Africa, the languages are highly political. Who is talking which language, when, and why? So I was really proud of that we could manage to put all those languages in one performance and also have these subtitles there working.
Thank you for now, and let us go to the next duo. Mathijs van Til from the Netherlands. He founded BrotherTill together with his brother Peter, with the aim of hybridizing the arts. BrotherTill works on multimedia projects where music, spoken word, video, and performance art go together. And let me also introduce you to Lindsey Appolis from South Africa. Self-taught photographer based in Cape Town, and his work extends into film, advertising, street photography, performance, and fine arts. Together with others, you worked on a project, Ons Perspectief, and like Krotoa, Eva van de Kaap, a project that started a few years ago and developed over time. Mathijs, can you explain how did your creative story with South Africa start?
Well, the project started in 2019. There was a connection with South Africa. We saw some people involved in a movie called Noem My Scully. And the soundtrack of that film was created by Hemelbezem, Simon Witboy. And we knew that he was in the Netherlands. So we contacted him and invited him for just a spontaneous studio session. He is a rapper, a writer, but also a TV host in South Africa. So we met in the studio, shook hands and introduced ourselves a little bit, but immediately after that we started creating. So I was just sitting behind my computer and my keyboards and creating music. And by the end of the afternoon we had a really fascinating piece of music. And in that, I was really inspired about the story that he told in his music. It was about, a country that I didn't know, of course. One specific thing I remember that he wrote about a water crisis at that time. Little parts of that just fascinated me. But then also the openness in experimenting with styles, because of course he's a hip hop artist, so writing to beats. But I guess challenged him to write on music that doesn't have a time or a beat, more abstract vibe to creating music, and he really digged that element also. So the way that we inspired each other was basically the start of the project, and that made me go to South Africa in April 2019. And from there, I worked with 9 or 10 rijmklets artists, and all starting from that same position, just introducing each other, but then immediately start creating. So get to know each other through creating, and that resulted in a first crossover hip-hop album.
And let's watch this clip.
For me, the Ons Perspectief, bigger than who we are, is a collective body of different characteristics.
We say we want to improve by engaging with others, by having a writing community, by sharing perspectives, Ons Perspectief. And that's the thing about the word us, it makes us borderless in a sense.
Because we don't know the weight of our being unless we see it sometimes. Ik zie die kleer wat in nood te hou. Ik bleek, maar nou wordt het gebreek. Zoek je zoon liggen mijn handen vouw, want ik word je zoon. You grew up in the environment that you operate in is different to this one.
There's a Dutch guy, there's a South African guy. We are buzzing on two different frequencies. In cultures, you experience that when you deal with another culture, there's many dode hoeken. There's many blind sides which you're not aware of.
Opening up different avenues where you wouldn't necessarily have explored in your mind if you didn't have the new information.
And I think if there's anything that the audiences will take away here in the Netherlands is that they would recognize themselves, but also they would find it very strange and they'll be curious about it. And that's a good thing.
You know, there's a perspective that will be taken and there's a perspective that will be given, you know. And it's always that equal, it must always be on equal footing. Nothing must be forced. And so that is Ons Perspectief.
So Ons Perspectief started not so long after pandemic started. I understood this did not stop you and resulted in a 72-hour-long film project. Hoe klink ons?
It was very interesting, especially considering the times that we were in, because at that point I think we were stuck in our houses for months and we had no creative outlets, and it's important for us as creatives to be creating, otherwise we kind of lose ourselves within ourselves. And so Mathijs came with the concept and idea of, how do we still create and work, because there's a much bigger online presence now. How do we use that to make something interesting? We decided to do this thing where I work with a local rapper, Chitsvinger, from my side, and Mathijs, they would work with an artist from their side, and then we kind of communicate online with one another through that medium.
Let's watch it.
Jets, Pieter, hoe klinken jouw haren 's ochtends vroeg? Wat is de frequentie van jouw roes? Wat voor geluid maakt jouw broek?
Hoe praat jou furniture? Is haar melodies in die skoorsteen waar die vuur brand? Hoe klink jou maniete?
For me, it's still fascinating about this work that we talked a lot about composition, or the feeling that we want to put into the visual element of it. And these guys went out into the city and they captured something that is in some way really similar. So at points you cannot recognize if it's Zwolle or if it's Cape Town. But yeah, also I guess still the differences that you see. The goal was to expand the project with more disciplines and more new creators, and see if we can also tell that story and share the perspective through dance, through theater, through visual art.
When Mathijs came down and said, okay, cool, we're going to put people in a space together and we're going to start creating. It's a wonderful idea, but a strange concept to a lot of the artists in the city. So it did take some time for people to go, wait, so you're telling me that I can actually just purely create for the sake of creation and making something potentially beautiful, or just making something. And that in itself was a quite an interesting learning for everybody involved, I think. We took the theater, the big theater, and we brought it to a community that really wanted to see it. It was a beautiful coming together of artistry.
Thank you. Thank you both for your contribution about the project Ons Perspectief. If you are watching and you would like to know more about South African Dutch cultural cooperation, you're very welcome to contact us at DutchCulture for more information, advice, and contacts. Thank you for watching, and until next time.